Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for another virtual event with Malaprop's Bookstore and Cafe. My name is Stephanie Jones-Byrne. I'm the event director here at Malaprop's in Asheville, North Carolina, and we welcome you from wherever you are. We have been doing these virtual events now for a couple years, 100 years, however long it's been. And, at first it was a little strange, but now we've really come to appreciate the fact that folks can tune in from all over. Authors can, our audience can, and we really appreciate the accessibility of that. We also love gathering in the store. And the store is open. We hope that you can come in and shop. We're having some events there, but we're just not at the point where we can have all of them. And so we're so pleased that we do have some authors who are able to join us virtually like we have this evening. And we know it's going to be a great conversation. So thank you for taking some time out of your busy schedule to be with us here to learn and listen and talk about books, which is what we love to do. So I'm going to give you a few sort of housekeeping announcements, introduce our authors, and then turn things over to them for the bulk of the hour before we get to the Q&A. So first thing, Q&A. We would love for you to ask questions this evening, and you have two ways to do that. My colleague Patricia Furnish is behind the scenes right now typing these instructions for you in the chat, so you don't have to memorize anything, but I do want to make sure that you are able to hear it and see it. Have a couple ways to absorb the information. So first way to ask questions is to log into YouTube to ask the question via YouTube chat. And the one favor that we ask when you ask a question in YouTube is to start your question with the letter Q. That will help us differentiate questions from any other comments that you might make. You're also more than welcome to make comments. Laudatory comments are particularly encouraged, of course. The second way that you can ask questions is to send us an email. We have an email address just for that purpose. It's virtualqa@malaprops.com. And like I said, Patricia's putting that in the chat for you, so you can just copy and paste that email address or go ahead and log in to ask your questions in YouTube. The other thing we want to remind you of is that we encourage you to purchase books to support the authors that we'll be talking to this evening, Patty Meredith and Darnell. We were talking in the back and I forgot to ask you how to pronounce your last name. So I'm going to ask you right now.
Well, I say Arnault. I have some family members that went off to New York and got fancy and say Arnault, but Arnault is how I'm always.
And Darnell?
Darnell, yeah.
Darnell Arnoult and Patty Meredith both, and Patricia will be putting those links to their books in the chat as well. We deeply appreciate it when you purchase books from us when you attend our events. That's what makes it possible for us to keep doing events, keep serving our community. And we know that you might not be anywhere near us right now. And so what we ask in that case is you just purchase your books from your local independent bookstore wherever you are. Indies aren't just places that are about selling stuff to people. We do that. It's what keeps the doors open, but we're also very much involved in our communities, and we give back, and we're a space where people can gather and exchange ideas. Malaprops has been doing that for 40 years since our founder Emeka opened the doors in 1982. And there are lots of great bookstores around, and we just hope that you find a bookstore near you to support if we're not it. And we thank you for doing that. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our authors this evening. Patti Meredith grew up in Virginia. Most of her stories are set in the Blue Ridge Mountains, but her debut novel that she'll be speaking about this evening, South of Heaven, takes place in the North Carolina Sandhills, where her family's roots run deep. After graduating from Virginia Tech with a degree in horticulture, she was fortunate to cultivate a career in television production. She holds an MFA in creative writing from the University of Memphis. Her stories have appeared in Appalachian Heritage, Still, The Journal, and Mulberry Fork Review. She's lived in Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Alabama, Tennessee, and Louisiana, and wouldn't take anything for the friends she's made along the way. She and her husband and their I just want to see Maggie and their Springer Spaniel live in Chapel Hill, which is just a few hours from us here in Asheville. Darnell Arnoult is the author of the novel Sufficient Grace and two poetry collections, What Travels With Us and Galaxy Wagon. Her shorter works have been published in a variety of journals and anthologies. She's the recipient of the SIBA, that's Southern Independent Booksellers Alliance, thank you, Poetry Book of the Year Prize, the Weatherford Award, the Thomas and Lily D. Chafin Award, the Mary Frances Hobson Award in Arts and Letters, and she's been nominated for a Pushcart Prize. Darnell holds an MA in English and creative writing from NC State and an MFA from the University of Memphis. She offers private workshops and coaching in writing fiction, memoir, and poetry, and is a regular instructor at the Table Rock Writers Workshop and John C. Campbell Folk School. And she lives in I'm going to say Mebane. I didn't do that either because Mebane, thank you. Mebane, North Carolina. Got that completely wrong. Have never been there. Sorry, Mebane. And you can find out more about both of these wonderful authors on their websites, which Patricia will also post in the chat. So thank you so much for joining us this evening. We're really looking forward to hearing your conversation and then getting to some questions in a bit. And thanks for guiding me along as I stumble through some of these names that I've never said out loud. We're all just human when we do these live events. So it's a pleasure to see you both. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. We're excited to be doing this. We love independent booksellers. We love independent bookstores, and we're grateful to Malaprops. I'm going to open by just saying how I met Patty Meredith. We have a mutual friend in Georgianne Eubanks and Donna Campbell, and who travel North Carolina. They're filmmakers, and Georgianne is an author. And at one point, Georgianne and I were in the North Carolina Humanities Council together. And they said, you've got to meet this friend of ours, Patty. We're gonna go down to Davidson for our next meeting. You got to meet Patty Meredith. And Patty and I ended up meeting while we sat in a hammock and drank liquor one night. And she grew up in Galax, Virginia, and I grew up in Henry County, Virginia, Martinsville, Bassett, Fieldale, which were very close together. And we found out we actually knew some of the same people. And several years later, I was living outside of Nashville. Patty was living in Huntsville, and she was starting to write fiction. And Georgianne recommended that she get in touch with me, because I was teaching writing to adults who, wanted to write novels and short stories and memoirs and things like that. And so we would meet in Murfreesboro at a Mexican restaurant about once a month, was it? Yeah. And we met several times. And I finally just said, you don't need to be my student. You just need to come be in my writing group. And I had a group of women that we met regularly in Nashville. And so she just became a writing partner. She was so talented right from the get-go. And this novel, I've been waiting for a long time for this novel to materialize, and I'm just really excited.
I think everybody that I know has been waiting for this novel to materialize, and they're really glad that it's over. Yeah, so Darnell had to read a lot of bad pages, but she read them with love and helped. And what I want to do tonight is talk about how what she taught me helped to make the book happen. I took her novel class, and one of the first things in the novel class, one of the first lessons or the first themes in the first week or whatever for her class was, who are your people? Who are your people, and where are you? And with the prompts that she was given, I knew that the novel was in Carthage, North Carolina, because I recognized, when I started thinking of the scene, I recognized the bamboo that was in my grandmother's backyard in Carthage, North Carolina, which is in the middle of North Carolina, close to Southern Pines and Pinehurst, where the golf stuff is. And then Dean came to me. The first character that came to me was Dean. And this has been a long time ago, but it was the very first scene of the novel from this prompt. And so I'm going to read just that the scene that came to me all those years ago that, and I don't want to talk, people say, how long did it take you to write this book? And I'm like, 66 years. Okay. My whole life. But those of you who know me know that, anyway, this was the first scene from that. Okay. Dean's great aunt Belle had a thing about the bamboo. Her brother, Dean's granddaddy, had planted the patch that choked the yard and stretched all the way back to the piney woods. Belle told Dean all her brother cared about was whiskey, high-stakes poker, and fishing the PD River with a bamboo pole. She said he thought he'd sell fishing poles at the family store, but there wasn't a soul in Moore County who couldn't stop by the side of most any road and help themselves to all the bamboo they could carry. Dean took a hacksaw to the stubborn cane every spring. He imagined squeezing through the 20-foot high stalks was like being in jungle warfare in Vietnam. His daddy and his Uncle James both served in Vietnam. Dean had asked his uncle, "Is this bamboo like over yonder?" Uncle James said no. Dean believed the bamboo must be even thicker in Vietnam, so thick it swallowed his daddy up and never spit him out. When Dean was a boy, he'd get in the bamboo and play soldier. He'd pretend he was on a rescue mission to find his daddy. He imagined walking up on him in a little clearing. "Well, Dean, am I glad to see you?" his daddy would say. The day he turned 18, Dean put on the camouflage jacket and pants he'd gotten at the Army-Navy store in Fayetteville. He snuck out of the house knowing if his mama or his Aunt Belle figured out what he meant to do, they'd have a fit. He went downtown and stood at attention outside the recruitment office. But when Keith Martin showed up, he said, "Dean, your head's not right for war." He'd never thought much of Keith Martin, but Dean figured his rank gave him the last word. Dean knew his head wasn't like everybody else's. He'd had trouble as a child, but having his dreams so quickly denied left him adrift and searching for a good long while. So from your class,
Love Dean.
I love Dean too, but this, doing that prompt and that thing, it gave me the place, it gave me Dean, it gave me the time, because the Vietnam War, his father was missing. And so I knew that it was, I put it in 1998 because I also knew that Dean was like in his 20s. But just that one prompt gave me so much to go from. And then I started asking questions like, well, who are your people? Like we do, right? Who are your people? Where are you from?
Yeah. And Dean just, you could tell there was this whole novel behind Dean. You could tell it was just all around him, and he was the keyhole that was going to get Patty in. That was what was important. And character, action, and language. That's where every good novel comes from. That's the triangle that you use to examine fiction and develop fiction and come to understand what revision really is, which is writing. It's not fixing or editing, it's writing. And so Patty just started coming up with all these other great characters.
And I did it in first person. It was like from the prompt at the very beginning, I was just writing, Dean was in first person, and I wrote the whole novel in first person. And it's written the novel is written in three voices: Dean, his mother Fern, and her sister Leona. It's set in 1998 in Carthage, North Carolina. The sisters are totally estranged, but they end up having to live back together in Carthage, which, Darnell at one point was like, conflict is good. You gotta have something happening. So, okay, conflict. And so it's their story, and then the backstory, and it's really about family, and it's about people telling lies a lot and just trying to lie themselves out of the messes they get into.
So you started in first person, and what I usually tell people is write the scene as it comes to you. If it comes in first, write it in first. If it comes in third, write it in third. However it comes to you, because it's too early in the process to know what point of view you really need to tell the story. And the more point of view types you experiment, the more you learn about your story. But then you decided to move to third person. Why was that?
I don't know. I think it was a suggestion in the internet. I think Sonia Livingston and Courtney, they were like, you need to do something. It was just it didn't give me enough chance to widen the novel. And so like I'm gonna read the very first I think this shows, like I was talking to Darnell yesterday, you know, this is a scene that the very first scene is Fern, Dean's mother, in her office. She works at the local newspaper in Carthage, and she's in her office. And, you know, she couldn't walk around and go, oh, I'm going to go to the Venetian blind now, you know, that kind of thing. So the third person kind of helped me get the scene set better. Is that right? That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
right.
All right. So here's this. A Venetian blind sagged over the front window of the Carthage bureau of the Citizen Times. Fern McQueen was careful with the tattered pull. Every morning she expected the string to unravel in her hand. Across the way on the courthouse lawn beneath a white oak, her son Dean sat on a granite bench, a memorial to her husband Mac, missing in action since the Vietnam War. Dean visited the bench most mornings before clocking in at Frank's garage. We talk, Mama, he said, in my head. Fern had tried to dissuade her son from telling people about these talks, knowing it only brought about more pity from the town of Carthage. But Dean was Dean. Her boy had no secrets. Fern stepped back from the window so as not to be seen by other early risers making their way to work. She knew plenty in town thought her standoffish, but she was mostly only wary of attention. She settled into her unsteady chair that was more apt to tilt than swivel. Fern handled the local obituaries for the paper and found her daily email from Thompson Funeral Home. Eileen Robinson, good riddance. Eileen had been one of her daddy's high school girlfriends and hadn't liked it one bit when he eloped with Matilda Moore from Red Springs. Fern suspected Eileen had spread the worst gossip about her parents, not that either of them ever missed a chance to cause a scene. So it did, the third person really did open things up. And Darnell and I've talked about this before. At first, I was kind of freaked out by that voice because it was like, who is that?
Mhm.
And then you came up with a great way to make me feel about it.
Well, so with point of view is really a continuum of intimacy. You know, the first person is most intimate, and total omniscient is the least intimate, but you have the broadest view. And so with close third, it's like you have a guardian angel on the character's shoulder. So the guardian angel can see, you can tell I was raised Catholic.
I just love that.
But the guardian angel can see things and know things that the character can't know. And they can see and describe things in a way that a character can't, because a character only sees out of their eyes and thinks their thoughts and uses their vocabulary, and they're limited to what they know. But this close third can know more, but they can also know inside that character's head, their thoughts. And so it gives you a lot of breadth in the language you can use and the parts of the story you can tell and describe, but you still have that intimate experience of being in the character's head, and it works really well.
Yeah, and I feel like it still has the attitude. I think if I hadn't written everything in first person, I wouldn't have understood Dean and his attitude toward the world, or Fern and her, you know, she's kind of shy and she's, you know, that kind of thing. And her sister Leanne is totally different. And just to have them, I think the third, with a close third, you can still have a little attitude in there.
Yeah.
And so that really helped me. But oh gosh, I don't know. It was a lot. And just building the story, having the story come together. And so we went through, you know, different scenes, and I knew what was going to happen. I kind of knew what was going to happen. But then the other part of this journey has been great readers. And Darnell was a great reader. Catherine Milam was a great reader. Marjorie Hudson. I mean, I've had Donna and Georgianne, Susan. Y'all are like, oh yeah, we all read this book 1,000 times. But that helped a lot too, because I'll talk a little bit about Leona, Fern's sister. She lives in Raleigh and has a totally different life. She's married to an orthopedic surgeon. She's gotten away from Carthage. She's happy that she got away from Carthage. She is circumstances make it where she kind of has to go back there, and that's what causes a lot of conflict. But it was really late in the process of this book that Leona was still kind of a stereotype,
Mhm.
I
A
think.
little bit.
And she's being nice a little bit. But she was, but it took me, I had to get out of it. I had to really, she was the hardest to get to know. And it's odd because it's like, it's because of the person she was that she was hard to get to know, because she wasn't, Dean will tell you anything. Fern will tell you most everything. Leona didn't want to tell me anything.
And the other thing is Leona would be hard to get to know in real life.
Right.
I mean, it's not just as a character. She
No,
was hard to get to, she'd be hard to get to know if she was your neighbor.
Yes, yes. But
Yeah.
it was like, and that's where, a lot of the backstory came in for that. But
I think it's also important too, when, especially, when you're dealing with characters who can fit a stereotype, and Larry Brown is a great example of this. He has all these characters that could so easily be stereotypes because they do have characteristics that are common among Southern white male stereotypes. But he gets to know them so well that he moves through and beyond the stereotype, so that they're a real person with good and bad and, tall and short and all this dimension in spite of how they fit a stereotype. And I think that's something you did really well.
I've loved hearing people talking about the characters and like they were like real people.
Mhm.
I was at a book club in Wilmington, and this woman said that Fern, she was just a I won't use the word she said, but it was like, she had some issues, and other people came to her defense. And people were like, one of the questions at the book clubs, I asked, who would you want to have lunch with? And, people want to have lunch with Leona, other people feel an affinity toward her and that kind of thing. So that's been a great thing to have these people come to life like that. And talking about the scenes, and so we, I have the characters, I have the place, I have what's going on, I even have like a little conflict going on, a little plot.
Having Leona and Fern in the same house is a lot of conflict.
And I have a great sister. I don't know if she's watching tonight, but this is not about me and my sister, my sister and me. Anyway, it's not about us, but I have a great sister. And I think a lot of y'all have great sisters. That sister relationship is very fraught and very important, probably, extremely important. And so it was fun to write the sister scenes. But one of the other classes in Darnell's class schedule thing was about supercharging the moments. And I'm going to read your favorite part.
Okay, and I'll cry, but I cry all the time, but this will make me cry.
Yeah, I cry too. Well, just cry.
Just cry. Just cry.
This is Fern thinking back about her parents, and her parents were just not great.
They had problems. They had challenges.
They had challenges. But this is a scene where she's kind of thinking back about her parents growing up. Fern sat by the Magnavox and tried to picture her parents happy. She pulled out the old records they used to play, Martha and the Vandellas, Chubby Checker, the Drifters. She remembered standing in the doorway and watching them dance, how her daddy would see Fern and say, "Come on, honey, dance with us." She remembered trying to swing and sway like her mother, but the harder Fern tried, the more her mother shimmied and shook. Soon they'd forget Fern was there, and she'd slip out unnoticed. So what is it about
my heart? It just because she wanted to be noticed, but there was no room in their relationship for her, and it just breaks my heart
to see that.
Yeah,
to see that happen.
Yeah,
to see that child.
Yeah, to see her, be ignored and her sort of slink away.
That's hard too. That was hard too for me because I remember this guy at a class I took at Duke Continuing Ed, not Georgianne's class, but later. And one day he brought in Parade magazine, and they have those ads on the back and they have those commemorative plates and everything. And he showed this ad, and it was like a kitten, And he was like, he held it up and he said, "This is what you don't want in your stories." A kitten on a plate. And it was like, what? But he was saying not to be overly sentimental.
Mhm.
And that's another thing. He told me, like, because I can go there. I
Right.
can go there, you know.
We all can go there.
And you said read Larry Brown
Yeah.
to get out of it, you know, just to pick up something, you know, little Ron Rash, little Larry Brown, little.
And stay as
Real.
concrete as you can. The more concrete you are, the less likely you are to wax sentimental.
Yeah.
And you can have sentiment in a scene and sentiment in the book, but you don't want it to be sentimental and sappy. And I think because you stay concrete, and because we had the records, and because of the dancing, and because we were so much in the room, we felt her heartbreak. You didn't tell us to feel that way. We felt it.
Okay.
That's what I think. Y'all can decide when you read the book. But that's what I think.
So anyway, it's just been a great journey, and it's been really fun. And I'm so happy that it happened. If it hadn't been for the pandemic, it wouldn't have happened. I really needed that time. I didn't know it. All these years I thought, well, I'm working on it. I'm working, you know, I write a little bit here and there and yonder. But it took the pandemic to have no social anything going on, no traveling, no seeing, no doing, and to really keep that story in my head. And that's not true for everyone. There are people that have, you know, real lives that write at the same time.
Yeah.
I just noticed that clock sticking out of my head. I'm just gonna move it here. But for me, it really did take that time to listen, to be able to hear them talk, the characters talk to me and tell me what was going on. So that's the pandemic kind of worked. And
yeah, because when you're not in a pandemic and somebody calls you and said, let's go have lunch, or let's go for a walk, or you can go, yeah,
I'm doing that.
And in a pandemic, not so much.
Especially if you're not working, you know, you feel like we've got all the time in the world, but
you really don't.
You don't.
Yeah.
You don't. And so halfway through the pandemic, I saw on the Facebook page that Scott Douglas at Main Street Rag was looking for accepting chapters, interested in publishing a novel. And so I thought, what have I got to lose? And so I sent him chapters, and then about a month later, he said he was interested in publishing the book. And that is when, I know this is a cliche, and I'm a queen of the cliche, but the rubber met the road, because I was like, oh my God, somebody's going to actually read this. What am I going to do? And so, of course, I called Darnell, but just getting it together, you know, really thinking, okay, somebody is going to read this. This has got to make sense. And I'll just keep talking about Darnell and I were talking yesterday about the pros and cons of there's so many ways to publish now, and I'm with a small independent press, and you know there are pros to that. I mean, one of the pros is that the day that Darnell was on the phone, my husband was on the computer, and I was sitting beside him, and we were making this cover. You know, we got this cover from this emu from the stock photos off the internet, and then I made him a watercolor on my phone.
This is one of my favorite book covers. I love this book cover.
It's like Darnell was like, no, put him on the other side. Put him on the other side. Like, put him on the other side. Like, but
just show one eye.
Yeah, just show one eye. But for it to be a labor of family love, for everybody to be involved in it, was a huge pro, and I loved that a lot. And to be able to talk to Scott about everything was very helpful. But you know, distribution is a thing. You know, I'm the distribution center.
Yeah.
And I told somebody too the other day, it was like, you know, for all these years, I felt like a real failure for I just can't get the book written. I can't get the book written. So then I got the book written. I'm like, yay, me. And then it's like, it's published. And now I feel like a real failure for getting it out, you know? So it's like, you've got all these levels of opportunity to feel really bad about it.
But Patty's doing a great job. She should not feel so bad.
Malaprops is this is huge.
But you all of a sudden, for a while, you're this introvert who can spend time with these characters in your head, and you're doing the thing you love, which is writing and creating and inventing. And then all of a sudden you have to switch gears and become a business person and understand marketing. And even if you have a big publisher, you have to understand what they need from you, and you have to be on the road, and you're tired. And,
talk about Sufficient Grace, about your experience.
Well, so with Sufficient Grace, my novel, that was published by a division of Simon and Schuster. And initially they had a great cover, and it was accepted as a literary novel. And then the sales reps decided that maybe it could be marketed to Jan Karen's audience if I took out all the cuss words. And I didn't take out all the cuss words. And but they did change the cover.
I've been throwing those cuss words out.
I know. Well, but they did change the cover to appeal to a different audience. And I never liked the covers that they come up with.
That's a beautiful.
Ron Rash complains about having pickup trucks on his covers. Well, what if he has a rocking chair with a pie in it? I mean, it won't be the same. But and so there was that kind of issue. But I got 2 national tours with that book. And I was really grateful. It was a great experience. But, I got so tired one day, I called my son and cried. And I said, I just need you to listen to me cry. I'm in a rental car somewhere between Little Rock, or not Little Rock, but Blytheville, Arkansas, and Memphis. And I just need to cry, and I just need you to listen, because William will worry about me. And my son would not worry about me, because he's used to me being crazy. But so that happens. But then I also have been published by a well-respected university press, LSU Press, for my poetry. And I had a lot of input into what the book looked like. And there was a lot of discussion about what the book needed. And I felt like I was really heard on those things with the small university press. The print runs were not large, and you don't make much money off of poetry. But it was still a really great experience with the small press. And then for a small independent press, you have issues like, do they distribute through Ingram, because that's a big stumbling block. But there may be ways around that, and Patty's learning about that.
Yes, and so call me, I will help you.
And then there's a lot of people now who can very easily self-publish, and being self-published used to have this huge stigma, but it doesn't so much anymore, because publishing is becoming so democratic. Before, it was like, if you couldn't get somebody to publish your book, you could publish your own book. And people didn't respect it because they didn't feel like it was vetted. And bookstores didn't want to even talk to you. And now that's changed. That's radically different than it was before. And we've got, electronic books, and we have audio books. And so the whole landscape is different than it was, 30 years ago, even.
But North Carolina has some amazing presses.
They do. So the Hub City. I mean, there's a ton of really Blair, absolutely.
Yeah. We're so lucky in the state.
Yeah. And Blair is owned by a Southern writer, Lynn York, who published 2 novels and learned about publishing from the author side before she became a publisher. And so she's very generous with authors.
It's fun.
Because of that.
And I hope Judy Goldman's watching this, because she's
supposed to be out
there. Are you out there, Judy? Because I have quotes on my desk that I live by, and one of them was from Georgianne saying, "Discipline is remembering what you want." And the other one, I remember I sent Judy an email one time and said, "What do I do?" Because I just wanted somebody to just tell me, give me the magic word. It's like, just put me out of my misery, tell me, and nobody can do that. It's like, you got to write the book.
Yeah, there's no magic word.
But Judy said, it's a war of attrition. Don't attrish. And so thank you, Judy. And I want to be the poster child for not attrition. Is that right?
Yeah, you did the trish.
I did the trish. And just do it. I've had, there are day lows, there are difficulties, but book clubs are my jam. I mean, like I was saying earlier, to be able to sit in a room with people who feel about your characters that they are as real as you feel about them is a huge gift that I just wouldn't take anything for.
You know, and this industry is set up to make you insecure. You know, but you just have to accept, as a writer, rejection is part of your job description. Revision is part of your job description. You know, doing it over.
And I
Doing
was,
it differently.
I was in a bad place not long ago, and just thinking, oh, what am I doing? And I went to a bookstore here, McIntyre's, and Pete said, are you coming to the reading tomorrow? And I'm like, what? And he's like, Craig Johnson's coming. And Craig Johnson writes those Westerns, Longmire Westerns. And I was like, oh, I don't think so, you know. And he's like, you got to come. And so I did. And Craig Johnson stood up there and talked, and he exuded this joy, and it reminded me of why we do it. It was just the most wonderful thing and I came home just so like, yeah, that's why it's fun, and there's so much joy to it. And so I'm working on stuff again, but yeah, the comfort zone thing is difficult. And one thing, I was talking about how the characters are very real to me. And during one low point through this, I was just kind of, you know, somebody said something about the book, and I was like, well, you know, it's not War and Peace. It's not, you know, it's just what it is. And I swear I could see Dean looking at me saying, we told you everything. We gave you our stories. We trusted you. And here you are saying that it doesn't matter. And I felt so bad. I was like, okay, I'm sorry. So when I get down, I talk to Dean.
Well, and Dean is a character worth writing about, and you rose to the occasion. I mean, that's the fear, is that you can't. I mean, the hardest job for a writer is to become the writer you need to be to do your characters justice. And that's the struggle. So you've got this perfect thing in your imagination and this very imperfect thing on the page, and your job is just to close the gap.
I gotta write that down. I'm still taking notes.
I think I probably said that to you before. You got it somewhere in your notes. I say it all the time.
I want to read something. Let's see. Keep talking.
Okay. All right.
Find it.
So I do think it's important to remember why we write. We write because we love to make things up. I mean, we love telling stories. We love getting to know a life we might have lived by, you know, being inside our characters. And sometimes we're writing highly autobiographical fiction so that we can change the way things happened or see it from a new angle. That's a very cathartic experience that can also be really valuable for a reader.
Yeah.
You know.
And before we go into questions and everything, I just wanted to, I want to read this review that Donna Campbell wrote, because I want to tell you what, sometimes you don't know what your book's about. But when I read this, I was like, oh my God. Okay, so this is what Donna says about
Donna's brilliant.
That's brilliant. The story of the McQueen family gives us lessons in forgiveness, redemption, and transformation, and even a few tips for getting rich quick. There are moments I laughed out loud, times that I worried and cried, but mostly when I finished, I wanted to get in the car, drive to Carthage, and see if I could find anyone who ever knew these wonderful people. I wanted to eat a biscuit, write a letter to my uncle, and even go to church. And I found myself wondering just whatever happened to Zig Ziglar. So that's kind of, and the emu is about Dean decides, I don't know if y'all remember back in 1998 when people thought the next big thing might be emu oil. I mean, it was like, and so Dean gets this idea that he wants to make something of himself, and he decides that he's going to do that with an emu farm. But I will also say that no emu are harmed in this book ever.
Yeah.
So
And I will, I want to throw out the Zig Ziglar quote because I love Zig Ziglar.
that's where I got Zig Ziglar.
And I use this quote all the time. Zig asks, "Do you want to be a wandering generality or meaningful specific?" And Dean is most definitely a meaningful specific, and so
Okay.
is Fern, and so is Leona, and every character in the
But
book.
I
are
really
meaningful
appreciate you
specific.
giving me Zig Ziglar.
You're welcome. I love sharing Zig Ziglar.
But as you can see, the other reason to write is you get to hang out with great people.
Mm.
And the people I've gotten to meet by pretending to be a writer has been really amazing. And I wouldn't trade anything for it. That's been so much fun, and it continues to be fun. And and I know a lot of y'all out there are those people. So
I'm really proud of you.
well, thank you. I'm really glad that it's kind of over.
But now you have to start another novel, and you can't take 66 years to write it. So
I see Stephanie up there.
Yeah,
Hey,
I think-
Stephanie.
we might have questions, maybe.
Are y'all ready for audience questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
First of all, I just want to say that it's been delightful to listen to the two of you talk. And I know that sentiment is shared by the other folks in the audience because they've been saying so in the chat. And Judy Goldman did weigh in. And we'll and I know that
Judy's book Child.
Exactly. From
yeah.
Malaprop.
Yes. Yeah. And we saw Judy with that book a little while ago, and yes, absolutely. We can add that to your recommendation list. That's Judy's most recent, and Abigail DeWitt also joining us this evening. Author of News of Our Loved Ones,
which is an incredible book.
Yes. Incredible. And Lynn York from Blair. Thanks you for the plug. So I'm not going to read all the chat right now. I'll send all of that to you later, so that you don't have to, try to scan through it and do this all at the same time. It's a lot, but just a general blanket, lots of highs and huzzahs from folks out in the world. So, and congratulations, and people loving the book. So it's been great to listen to you. We do look forward to that podcast at some point.
We're working on it. We're working on it.
Yeah. I think you've got a built-in audience there. So let's go ahead and get to a couple audience questions. So the first one we got while you were talking about perspective in the writing bit in the beginning, and Roberta is asking, is close third like third person limited?
Yes, that's another way of saying it. And it is a spectrum. So sometimes you can be close limited, third person limited with 2 points of view, but most of the time it's one character's thoughts and then the rest of the world. And but you're only in one head. But it's the same. It's a term that's used interchangeably.
Great. Yeah. It was a great little mini writing workshop that you've given this evening as well. So that's nice. We always have a lot of writers and aspiring writers in our audiences, I think. So that's great. Paul says, and this is putting something out there as well. Do you anticipate major changes to characters or plot when, not if, you write the screenplay?
I think it would make a great movie. I think it absolutely should be a movie.
I think it should too.
Yeah.
I think it should too. And you know what, Paul? If somebody wants to make this movie, they can pretty much do whatever they want to do.
Just talk to Patty.
I'm not going to be one of those people like, oh my God, they did it. Well, I probably would actually. Yeah, I don't know. Wouldn't that be fun though? I always, because Roy, there's a preacher in the book, Roy, and from the get-go, he was John Goodman. So,
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's interesting. So you actually had an actor cast in your mind.
Just that one.
Tell them how you
Okay,
came up
well-
with Fern, because I think that's really a great idea, the way you came up with Fern.
Do y'all
image.
remember that down, J. Jill catalog, J. Jill clothes?
Yeah.
They
linen.
still have J. Jill.
I'm just asking.
They still J. Jill.
My husband's like, oh my God, he's talking about J. Jill.
I'm a fan. So It's your target demographic right here. I like linen.
Oh, it's the Cindy Joseph,
Cindy
the
Joseph.
Boom woman.
Now she has a makeup artist since she passed away, but she was in my head. I tore out pictures from J. Jill catalog of her. And I've been writing this book so long that Dean was actually a very young Billy Bob Thornton. I'm sorry, this is just not going on the literary.
No, that's okay.
trail, is it?
I was trying to figure out who Billy Bob Thornton could be in the movie because he's
Anyway.
too old to be Dean. But
That's
Okay.
he could
That's
be
great.
Blue.
That's great. Your casting can evolve, you know, as we get to that point, because, you know, it's now out there in the world. So there you go. And you were talking about being fine with whatever anybody wants to do with it when they make the film. And I'll just go ahead and interject, since you talked about Ron Rash earlier, who's amazing. And I was at an event he was doing one time, and you know, he mentioned how someone had asked him how he felt about one of his books, you know, in their estimation, the movie, you know, he asked the question like, well, how did you feel about them ruining your book? You know, with that movie, they didn't like the adaptation. And he's like, well, my book's just fine. You know, they didn't ruin the book. They just made this movie that, you know, was nothing like it, you know, maybe didn't live up to your expectation, but, you know, so I think, so that, you know, that was just the perfect perspective to have. It's just, you know, there's the book he wrote, and then there's the movie they made, and
there's his other art form.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And if the twain don't meet, then so be it. Yeah. So I think that's a great, you know, you're in good company with that.
Oh yeah. I'm sure.
So got some more questions. Lynn, who we talked about earlier, said, do you think that writing your first novel will help you with writing a second?
Oh wow, Lynn. I do. I think if I continued with the same characters, for sure. Absolutely. I mean, because I do know what happens in the next chapter. I know, and it's not because I was really trying to think of it. It was just because they wouldn't stop. And so I don't know if that's going to continue, but it's like I do with the same character. But with a different novel, I don't know. I think I would not. Maybe I'd be more disciplined. Maybe, I don't know, but to think about creating a new world with new people, I'm not sure. I'm working on short stories now, and it's not helping.
Well, and talk a little bit about the difference in that process. You say you're working on short stories.
I'm going back and look at. I have quite a few that just, you know, they just need revising really badly and editing and everything. And it is, you know, knowing that I've gotten to know the characters in South of Heaven so well, I realized that and Darnell tried so hard to tell me this. I mean, she gave
Nobody listens.
Nobody listens. I mean, the prompt she gave, the work she gave us to do to get to know your people. And I would just smile and nod at her like, yeah, well, I'll do that. You know, I'll write 50 things that they'd have in their dresser. Right. You know, but even with a short story, there's still no shortcuts. You still have to know the 50 things that the woman might have in her dresser or whatever. So I think writing the novel made me realize there aren't any shortcuts. That if you just stay on the surface with a person, that's what the story's going to do too. It's just going to float around. So yeah, but
there's all sorts of ways to get at fiction, and lots of ways to write a novel and to write short stories and poems and memoir, all those things. But one surefire way to get something is to start with concrete things that your character sees and touches. And do you have to do that? No. Is it a good way to get something in your head, you know, cemented in your head of a real universe that they live in, or a real world they live in? Yeah. And it works for stories just like it does for the novel. The other great thing about switching gears to poetry and short story after writing a novel is you do have a better chance of a sense of completion sooner. There's a little bit better time frame for a payoff. And but then there's another novel waiting for Dean. I think Patty's not sure, but I think there is.
I don't know.
I'm working on it, Dean.
I'll put the emu on the other side, right?
Yeah, there you
go. Get some more questions, which is great. Susan says first that she's so proud of you. This is Susan Schmidt, and then asks how much of what happens in South of Heaven was true.
Okay, Susan's a really good friend of my sister's. Okay, what was true? Nothing really. I mean, I think I've had emotions that the characters have had. I felt that emotional truth. I've maybe some shame in there. We won't go into that, but but using the emotional truths of some things, definitely. But as far as circumstances, no. And I did have a really good friend in Chattanooga back in the 80s, who the character Ned is kind of based on, and life did not turn out as well for my friend as it does for Ned. And I think I wrote what I wish had happened for my friend. So I hadn't thought about that. Yeah. So there's that. But it's not me. It's not my sister.
But we all make mistakes that we then have to live with.
Yes.
And live with the consequences, which is why I think all these characters are so great, because everybody can identify with Fern's predicament and Leona's disillusionment. You know, we've all been there.
So Jane asks, and this is a great question, what music, if any, did you play while writing?
Oh, I'm really glad you asked that question, because I stole the title from a song. South of Heaven is on Matresa Berg's album called Dreaming Fields. And the novel had a lot of different titles, a lot of working titles, and I just couldn't think of it. Nothing felt right. And Lee and I were on our way from Memphis to Nashville to go to a Americana festival. And I just gotten the CD, Matresa Berg, B-E-R-G, her CD called Dreaming Fields. And this song came on called South of Heaven. And it's like, this ain't where the angels dwell, south of heaven, north of hell. And I was like, oh my God. And so that's where the title came from. And that whole album,
it's a great
album. And so I just sent her a book. A mutual friend said that she was interested. She wanted to see the book, because he had told her that I was going to use this, because I was like, is this okay? And it's like, yeah. There's also a South of Heaven song that's like by Metallica or something. So if you Google it, you get this. That's not the one. But so
although that might resonate with other folks, so that's okay too.
It's in there.
I will say this though, anybody who hasn't heard Matresa Berg, every one of her songs has a novel inside it.
Yes.
They're
Absolutely.
There's a novel in every single one of them.
She's amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I listen to a lot of Americana music, a lot of singer-songwriter music. And my nephew, Douglas, and his wife, Talisha, have a group called Wild Ponies. And they have a song called Love Is Not a Sin. And that song resonates with the book big time. And so I had to text Douglas and say, I'm stealing your line. I put it in the book. And he's like, okay. So I was lucky to have creative family members to steal from.
Well, I love the statement you made previously about it being like a family affair, while you were
Yeah.
working on the cover, and it sounds like it was in a larger sense as well. So I think that's lovely. Yeah. So we have just a few minutes left, and I don't see any new questions right now, although oftentimes there's one right at the end. But what I'll do in this moment is you've already actually given us some reading recommendations. You mentioned Larry Brown and Ron Rash and some other folks from talking earlier, but I wonder if there's anything in particular, in addition to each other's books, which we know you're recommending, and we're encouraging people to pick up as well. If you have anything else maybe that you've read recently, or just as just an all-time favorite that you want to recommend to folks who are tuning in tonight.
Can I go?
Yeah.
Okay, so I loved Olive
And
Kitchen.
Child by Judy Gilman, we've already mentioned, and
Child.
Abigail
And
DeWitt, because
Abigail's,
they're here with us. Yeah.
So I loved Olive Kittredge. I thought that was an incredible book. And then recently, and I think you loaned me the book, and it ended up
Did
on
you
my
read it?
nightstand. Yeah, I put it on my nightstand, and I have a lot of books get lost on the black hole in my nightstand.
Oh, yeah.
And one day I decided I was going to read that, and I did it with trepidation. It's sort of like going to the new Top Gun movie. You're afraid it's just going to be a shadow of the original. And so because I love Top Gun, but so I thought, okay, I love Olive. I'm going to give this book a chance, thinking there was no way in hell it could be as good as the original. And it was. And there were ways that I thought it might even be better. And it's Olive Again is the title. And I'm totally blanking. Who wrote
Elizabeth Strout.
Yeah, Elizabeth Strout.
And now
she's
she's
just
got-
fabulous.
And I loved Old William, and you've got that in your stack too, because I gave it to you.
Okay.
And now she's got another one with the same character out that I haven't gotten yet, that I bet I could get it at Malaprop's.
I think you can. Yeah. I'm pretty sure you can.
But I love her writing, and
Yeah.
I think that Old William and this one may be in first person, but she's just such an amazing writer that she makes it work, and it's got all the depth and everything that you want in anything. She's just she's a big favorite.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I think we've put a pretty big stack on people's TBR piles this evening. So thank you for that. We always like to do that with our audiences. And I would just like to invite the both of you to share anything that you want to make sure that people hear before we say good evening this evening.
I'd say don't quit. If you're writing, don't stop. It's the journey. But oh God, I'm just cliche master.
But you know what it is? It's a journey. Larry Brown says this in the beginning of On Fire. He talks about how when you write, which is a nonfiction book, but he talks about how when you start a novel, all those characters come and live with you in your house and sit with you when you eat dinner and go to work with you and do all those things with you until the novel is done. And you don't know how long they're going to be there to visit you. You don't know how long they're staying. And a novel just takes as long as it takes, and the most important thing is to take your creative impulses seriously, not yourself, but your desire to do the thing, to take that seriously.
And when and that whole thing about, I'll remember that. If something comes to your mind, you won't remember it. You got to write that down.
Yeah, keep a note.
Nobody's going to say that the same way twice, which is just drives you crazy. But and while they're talking to you, listen. And you have to spend time with them. You have to make time for them, and not
for the characters who are talking to you.
Make room.
Yeah. But and I'd just like to say thank you to Malaprops for doing this and for everything that you do, for all the YouTubes and all you got us through the pandemic with your YouTubes, and we appreciate that. And just thank you so much.
Well, you are most welcome. We've really enjoyed, and we've always for decades enjoyed doing author events, but it also helped get us through the pandemic, doing this with authors, and we'll continue just because it, you know, it keeps our options open, you know, lets people come who, you know, for whatever reason can't come to the store. So we really appreciate that. So thank you both so much for being with us this evening, for all of the great conversation, the beautiful reading, Patty, the wonderful writing advice for the folks in the audience, for all the writers at home. We are again delighted, and Patty, congratulations on your debut novel. It's exciting. I know that there are a lot of people watching tonight who are congratulating you and proud of you and excited for you. I really appreciate y'all taking the time, and everyone else for taking the time with us this evening. And we hope to see y'all again soon, however, wherever, whenever. We look forward to it. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you to everybody that showed up.
Yes, thank you.
Good night.
Okay.